Your birthday is coming up, or maybe it just passed. Either way, when somebody asked you what you wanted to do, you said the exact same thing you always say. Nothing special, just a regular day. Maybe dinner if people want to come, but don't go to any trouble. And you meant it, every single word. You were not being modest. You were not fishing for someone to push back and insist on throwing you a party. You genuinely, honestly, from the bottom of your heart, did not want a thing. My name is Sasha, and what I want to talk about today is where that came from. Because you were not born saying nothing special. Nobody is. Somewhere between the little girl who counted down the days to her birthday and the woman you are right now, something happened. Several things happened, actually, and most of them have a name, even if nobody ever gave them one in your presence. Before we get into it, I need to tell you something important. Because by the end of this video, I am going to share a pattern that researchers have identified specifically in Black women our age. A very particular kind of emotional labor that most of us have been doing so long, we don't even recognize it as labor anymore. It has everything to do with birthdays, and it has nothing to do with birthdays. Stay with me.
Let's go back. Way back.
Picture yourself at 8, maybe 9 years old. It's your birthday. Maybe your mama made a pound cake from scratch, the kind that took all afternoon and made the whole house smell like butter and vanilla. Or maybe it was a box mix and she put her own icing on it, the real thick kind she spread with a butter knife. Either way, that cake was made with intention. There were probably cousins, maybe church friends. The grown folks were in the living room talking loud. The kids were running in and out through the screen door. Someone put on the radio. If you were lucky, somebody had a slip and slide in the backyard, or your family made it to the community pool. And for one whole afternoon, the attention was on you. You were the birthday girl. Everybody knew it. You felt it. That birthday was real. That feeling was real. But here is what else was happening in that same house, in that same kitchen, at that same table. You were watching the women around you, your mother, your grandmother, your aunts. And what you watched them do, without fail, without complaint, without anyone thinking to ask if they were tired, was pour. They poured into everybody, into the church, into the neighborhood, into children and husbands and sick relatives and cousins who needed watching and neighbors who showed up hungry. And pour they did, with grace, with strength, with a smile that never let on how heavy the pitcher was getting. And nobody threw them a party. Or if somebody tried to, they waved it off. Don't make a fuss over me. I'm just glad everybody could come together. I don't need anything special. You were 8 years old, and you were already taking notes. Now add something else on top of that. Because your childhood was not happening in a vacuum. It was happening in America in the 1970s and early 1980s. And for a Black girl growing up in that era, that meant something very specific. You were navigating spaces that were not designed to make you feel celebrated. You were told, explicitly or by implication, to be twice as good and take up half the space. You learned early that drawing too much attention to yourself, wanting too much, asking for too much, could be read as a problem. The strong Black woman was not a compliment your community invented out of nowhere. It was a survival strategy. It got handed down from generation to generation because it worked. It kept you moving. It kept you standing. It kept you from falling apart in rooms that were already waiting for you to do exactly that. But strength, real, clinical, documented psychological strength, has a cost. And nobody ever sat you down and told you what that cost was. Here is where the research comes in. Because I want you to understand this is not just your personal quirk. This is not just how you were raised. This is documented and named. Dr. Cheryl Woods Giscombe at the University of North Carolina published landmark research on what she calls the Superwoman Schema. This is not a metaphor. This is a measured, documented psychological pattern found specifically and consistently in Black American women, and it has 5 components. A perceived obligation to always present strength, suppression of personal emotions and personal needs, resistance to vulnerability and resistance to asking for help, a drive to succeed regardless of the resources available, and an obligation to help others, especially family, that supersedes personal needs.
5 components, and your birthday runs directly into every single one of them.
Being celebrated requires you to present yourself as someone whose needs matter. Component 1 says no. Being celebrated means people are focused on you and your feelings for a whole day. Component 2 says suppress that. Being celebrated means being vulnerable, being soft, being seen without doing anything useful to justify the attention. Component 3 has been training you away from that your entire life. Being celebrated when you know good and well people have things going on, money is tight, everyone is tired. That sits wrong against component 5, which told you your job is to help, not to need. You did not develop this attitude toward your birthday because you were humble. You developed it because you were trained, systematically, by culture, by family modeling, by repetition, to be the one who gives and not the one who receives. And you were so good at it, so consistent for so many decades that you eventually convinced yourself you preferred it this way. Here's the thing I need you to sit with though. You know that feeling when you are planning someone else's birthday? A grandchild, a daughter, a close friend? You are on the phone for weeks. You are in group chats coordinating who is bringing what. You are thinking about what they like, what would make their face light up, what little detail would make them feel like somebody was really paying attention. And when the day comes and they are happy, something in you relaxes, something settles. You feel like you did your job. That feeling is real. That is not performance. But here is what is underneath it. You know exactly how to love someone through celebration. You have done it 100 times. What you have never been given permission to do is receive that same thing for yourself.
Not because you do not deserve it, because the receiving muscle was never built.
Let me tell you what happens to a muscle you never use. It does not disappear. It atrophies. It gets smaller and weaker, not because anything is broken, but because it was never asked to work. And now when someone tries to celebrate you, when they push past your nothing special, when they insist on making a fuss, the muscle cramps. It does not know what to do with the attention. It feels wrong. It feels like too much. It feels like wearing a coat that belongs to somebody else. It is not too much. You just have not used that muscle in a very, very long time. Now here is another layer, and this one hits different when you are in your 50s and 60s, because somewhere around this age, birthdays start carrying weight they did not carry before. A 2024 YouGov survey found that adults over 45 are the demographic most likely to say they would rather skip their birthday entirely. But when you add the weight of being a Black woman in this country at this particular age, the reasons for skipping go deeper than just not wanting to count candles. You may have spent your 40s watching people you love get sick: cancer, diabetes, heart disease. Black women in the United States face disproportionately higher rates of cardiovascular disease and certain cancers than almost any other demographic. You are not unaware of this. You live in a body that your doctor reminds you of regularly. And birthdays, when you are paying closer attention to your health than you ever had to at 30, start to feel less like celebrations and more like mile markers. Less like, look how far you have come, and more like, how much road is still ahead. That is a real feeling, and it deserves to be named out loud instead of buried under just a regular day. But here's what I also need you to hear, and this is the part I have been building toward. The same generation of Black women who watched their mothers and grandmothers pour until they ran completely dry, that same generation, your generation, grew up and made different decisions in so many areas of life. You went to college when your mother sometimes couldn't. You built financial independence that your grandmother never had legal access to. You raised children and sat down with them and talked about feelings in ways nobody ever sat down with you. You navigated spaces that were not built for you and carved out your own room inside them anyway.
You change things. Quietly, consistently, without asking anyone to write it down.
The one place the old programming is still running, the one place the update never installed, is this. The part of you that knows how to celebrate yourself. That part is still running on the original code from 1974. And you are not 8 years old anymore. The situation that created that code ended a long time ago.
The women you were watching in that kitchen have been gone for years, some of them. The rules that said, stay small and don't ask for much, were never actually rules. They were survival adaptations that got handed to you like heirlooms, and nobody told you that you were allowed to put them down. So let me say something plainly, not as advice, just as an observation from someone watching the pattern very carefully. Your birthday is not just a date on a calendar. It is the one day a year that was designed, literally and socially, to say, you matter, specifically, individually, not as somebody's mother, not as somebody's grandmother or caretaker or church mother or community pillar or the one who always holds it together. Just you. The person who was born on that particular day and has been figuring things out ever since. You matter on that day. And not because of what you do for other people, because of who you are. You do not have to throw yourself a party. You do not have to make it a production. But next time someone asks you what you want for your birthday, I want you to try something small. Before that word forms in your mouth, the nothing, the don't make a fuss, I want you to pause, just for 2 seconds, and ask yourself honestly, is there something underneath that nothing? Something small? Something quiet? Something you have not let yourself want in a long time? Because that little girl who circled things in the JCPenney catalog with a crayon, who counted the days on the kitchen calendar, who ran through a screen door in the summertime knowing today was her day, she is still in there. She never left. She just learned to be very, very quiet. It might be time to let her speak up. Tell me in the comments, what was your birthday like growing up? And how do you feel about your birthday now? I want the real answer, not the fine one. If this video hit something true for you, please like it and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And there is a video on the screen right now that I think you will want to watch next.